Well, welcome everyone. We are really excited that you're here. My name's Jennifer Clayton, and I have the honor of serving currently as the interim academic dean here at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development. And whether you are a student, prospective student, alumni, staff member, former staff member, faculty member, or just general friend of GW, we are very excited that you're here to hear Dr. Taylor's talk this evening. So just to lay out how we'll construct this evening, I'll do a brief introduction of Dr. Taylor, and then we will turn things over for Dr. Taylor to share a little bit with you about his life, his career, and this wonderful book that he has written about those experiences. And then we will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end of our evening, at the end of our talk today. When we get to that point, I will be able to field your questions and we can take those in the chat, or we will be able to have you come off mute if you'd like to ask your question directly. So as you're listening and making sense of what you're hearing, make a note of those great questions that you'd like to ask at the end, and Dr. Taylor will look forward to receiving those. So I just am going to take a moment, Dr. Taylor, to introduce you, and I know you will tell us more about your life and your experience, but I'll try to do this justice as we get started. Dr. Taylor holds a doctorate in education from GW, which of course we're delighted to see our alumni have such wonderful success and impact. Dr. Taylor has over 28 years of successful professional service to students and families serving in public schools in different areas. That includes 13 years as a chief school administrator or superintendent of schools in Willingboro Public Schools and the school district of South Orange and Maplewood, both in New Jersey. Dr. Taylor has served as an adjunct professor of education at Rowan and has a tremendous amount of experience both in the classroom and in the principalship. Throughout Dr. Taylor's career, he's been recognized as a champion of educational equity, instructional excellence, and innovative problem solving. His most recent work centered on generational challenges, including the development and implementation of the groundbreaking Intentional Integration Initiative. The III addresses the historic demographic underrepresentation of populations from elementary schools to advanced placement courses. And Dr. Taylor, I'm honored to have gotten to read about this last night preparing for your talk today. This approach and algorithm has been lauded by many and shared formally as a sustainable answer to racial and socioeconomic instructional segregation. Dr. Taylor has presented information about this model to the Educational Committee of the New Jersey State Legislature and is well known for thoughtfully leading large, complex school construction projects, which we were getting to remind ourselves earlier was part of your dissertation work here. And so we are very delighted to welcome you to GSEHD GW tonight and look forward to your talk. So with that, Dr. Taylor, I will turn things over to you. And I believe we might have a PowerPoint that you'll be sharing. So when you're ready, we are excited to welcome you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Dr. Clayton. And just want to say thank you to you and everyone on the team who has been working with me over the last couple of weeks preparing for this evening. And thank you to everyone who took part of your Wednesday evening to spend with us today and learn a little bit more about my journey as well as my book. So this is the title of my book here, The Courage to Lead with Integrity for Equity. And it's an authentic educational equity journey or thread. And that QR code there will be at the end for anyone who's interested in purchasing the book or learning more about it. So I've done presentations probably for the last 30 years now. And I've also sat in presentations probably for the last 40 years. And I always think that as a presenter, folks who are listening should know who that person is. And of course, how does this information that's being shared, how does it relate to my journey as the listener or participant? How does it relate to my mission or vision or my job responsibilities? And lastly, as a presenter or as a person who is participating, what am I leaving with to make me better? The whole point of us being in these type of opportunities is to learn and to be better and to walk away with something, not just sitting and watching for sitting's sake. So let's start with the first one. Who am I? As Dr. Clayton shared, that's my name. And right now, I'm a retired superintendent of schools, but I'm still doing educational consulting. Almost 30 years as a public educator. I was a classroom teacher. I was an assistant principal. I was a principal. My school was rewarded with the Beating the Odds, the first Beating the Odds award for DC Public Schools. I was an assistant superintendent, and I was a sitting superintendent slash chief school administrator for 13 years. I'm a graduate of Morehouse College, class of 91, and of course, a proud graduate of GW, and was very humbled that my dissertation with my chair, Dr. LeMasters, received recognition. And of course, I do adjunct professorial work. So many times when I do speaking engagements or opportunities to share, I try to highlight what's most important about this description and overview and information about me. I think that the most important thing that I try to highlight is that educational equity, the initiatives that are under the umbrella of educational equity, repeatedly shaped my life and inspired me to implement impactful measures to positively impact thousands of students who I was so fortunate to be the leader of districts for. But I didn't really realize that until after I retired, when I was reflecting back and starting to do consulting work, that this equity, educational equity, was just kind of a thread that just ran through my life, personal and professional. And when I began to research to see if there had been other works that were done and that were scholarly in nature, I couldn't find any. So I chose to create one. So you might recognize these folks. They look like me, right? That's my mom and dad. I call my dad in this picture Radio. Radio was his nickname, and he received that nickname, I was told, because he worked at the first Black radio station in Detroit, Michigan, which is my hometown. I was born in Detroit to these two folks, and while they look happy and wonderful in this picture in 1970 or so, my dad was an abuser. He abused alcohol, he abused drugs, he abused gambling, and unfortunately, he abused my mother. And that was the setting that I was raised in my earliest years until they were divorced at the age of around 3 for me. And this is a neighborhood very similar to my neighborhood in Detroit in the 1970s. Big, substantial homes in Detroit, but many were in decline. And that represented what I saw every day from birth until probably age 12 or so. I always ask this question when I do these presentations, because I think that this is a central Detroit thing. For the chat that we have you ever seen this before? Are you familiar with this? Do you know what it's called? If you think you know what this is called, type it in the chat that we have here today. I'll just pause for a moment. Everywhere that I speak around the country and have interactions and we talk about this particular picture, it is like only a Detroit thing. We grew up and thought that everyone had these things. They were just a part of the neighborhood. They just showed up. There was no schedule that our parents put on the refrigerator or anything. You just heard it happening outside and you went and joined it. And some of the questions that I received from folks who I've shared this with, like yourselves, is there chlorine in that thing? Or are there lifeguards in this thing? Like, was it really mobile? Yeah, yes to all those things. And let's see, I don't think I have access to the chat.
I see community pool.
Community pool. I see that. Yes, thank you. But what we called it, I don't remember the formal name. We called it the pool truck. right? Believe it or not, the pool truck would come around in the neighborhoods in the summer. And I know here in where I am now, I'm in Jersey City. Folks talk about the hot summers here in the Northeast, and they would open the fire hydrants. But that was our version of that in the neighborhoods that did not have pools at our homes or had community centers that had pools or things of the like. So when I was in that similar neighborhood that I showed you earlier, I used to see the acronym YBI written on stuff. It was written on garbage cans. It was written on postal boxes. It was written on telephone poles. And my friends and I, we thought YBI was like FBI or just a cool group. We didn't know until we became older that they were one of the most infamous street gangs in the country. I won't bore you by reading that description to you if you wanted to take your own time to check it out, but uh, they were the bane of the city of Detroit for law and order during that time. And it was the beginning of the crack cocaine epidemic in America. And but to us, as just young people growing up in that community, we didn't know that these were quote unquote bad guys. We thought that they were cool guys. And so just sharing those things as context for me, as I said earlier, that you should know the people who are speaking to you, who have the honor of coming and talking to you. So I didn't grow up as a silver spoon kid, even though my dad um, was an abuser, and we were relatively, um, depending on your perspective, poor, and there was crime happening and crime being glorified by the letters that we saw. Um, I wasn't a silver spoon kid. But what ended up happening in my life is that educational equity efforts and commitment to education through my mom and my grandmother and the teachers and principals and all those folks who were a part of my life resulted in some of the accolades that were shared earlier. So I'm just sharing a few of them here. Um, that this person who you see in these pictures and the person who's talking to you uh, based on where I came from and the circumstances that I was born into, it was not expected that I would have a doctorate from the esteemed GW. It wouldn't be expected that I would have an opportunity to lead thousands of kids in a school district or build more than $200 million in school construction based on that. But this just to me shows the thread and also shows the outcomes when we really invest in the equity uh, of kids receiving a fair and excellent education. So, number two on our list was, how does any of this relate to you, to your journey, to your mission, to your vision, to your job responsibilities? So, my first year as a school principal was also the launch of No Child Left Behind. It was also my first year as a student at GW in our doctoral program. And why was this significant? I'm sure that you're aware that No Child Left Behind was a law that was adopted in 2001, and it was a major educational reform initiative, and it was intended to ramp up student performance and the importance of student academic performance to public schools. In my career to this point, as a teacher, as an assistant principal, believe it or not, high stakes exams were not viewed as impactful um, for our work. Outside of the SAT, and every state, every city had their own homegrown placement tests. Even though I was in Detroit, our high stakes test was the California Achievement Test, the CAT. And so all that changed at this time. So I was named principal of Emory Elementary School, and it is one of the most challenged schools in Washington, D.C. Emory, Emory. And my experience at Emory was so powerful I still have Emory in all of my email addresses now, even those that didn't exist at that time. And so, just to give you a little context about Emory, this is an article from the Washington Post, and it talks about a teacher who was from Teach for America. I know I'm getting older now because I don't know if everyone knows what Teach for America is now. Um, but the Teach for America teacher who worked at Emory came from a very affluent family and went to an Ivy League school. Um, and however, he was accused of hitting or abusing a student. And for those who work in public schools now, I'm not sure where you are with the policy of what happens when you get accused of abusing a student. But at this time in DC public schools, uh, teachers and other folks who worked in schools, if you were accused of that, they would take you out of the school in handcuffs, right? That like they would arrest you. And if you were in school when you were arrested, that would happen. And this this specific situation became just a real black eye for that school. And as you can see, it received its own article in the Washington Post. It talked about how dysfunctional the school was. The school had four principals in 4 years, and it was known for just lots of fighting and negative things. It was also co-located with a men's homeless shelter. So while there were gates that separated us, there was a specific men's homeless shelter that shared the grounds with Emory. It was also a hub for students who were then labeled as emotionally disturbed. But during my tenure there, as I completed my studies at GW, there was also a dead body that was discovered on our grounds during a normal morning of school. And I use normal with air quotes. But at that time, I came to work. There was already police there and helicopters, and we weren't allowed to cancel school. And so those windows that faced that area, students and teachers all day long were able to, watch this very unfortunate situation that happened on our campus. And then one weekend, I was called in because someone who was from that men's homeless shelter burned down our playground. Our playground was heavy plastic, but the fire was so hot and so big it melted the students' playground. Our neighborhood was also known and notorious for being the hub of the then drug kingpin Rayful Edmonds, who recently is deceased, but he had national notoriety. So that was the context of that school when I became principal of Emory. And so within 6 years, we were so successful we became highlighted by DC public schools. They created a site for schools that they wanted to use as the spotlight schools, and we were that's one of my students there. Then, when again, this was just the beginning of the high level uh, assessment scores. Our school became out as the number 7 ranked school in Washington D.C. public schools. There we are. We were one of the few schools on this list that was still majority Title I, majority free and reduced lunch population, majority poor area. It was just a real victory that our students have performed so well. Because of that, the then superintendent of DC Public Schools, Dr. Clifford Janey, he named us the first beating the odds school for academic advancement of a high poverty population. A depressed school community, was how we were known when I arrived, and then we were through the hard work of a fantastic team, great teachers, kids, and parents, we were able to make this huge leap. And so Dr. Janey, who I just mentioned, he left DC Public Schools and became the superintendent of Newark Public Schools in Newark, New Jersey. And due to the success that we had, he reached out to me and recruited me to be one of his assistant superintendents. This is 2009, the same year that I received my doctorate from GW, and the same year I got married. It was a big year for me. And Dr. Janey, unfortunately, was terminated by Governor Christie when he became governor of New Jersey, and I quickly became a superintendent of a different district. And so we had, again, thanks to a great team and great work that we did, we had similar success when I was a superintendent. This is Willingboro, New Jersey. For those who are not familiar with New Jersey, Willingboro is South New Jersey, and I write about that in the book. And I talk about the history of Willingboro because it is a very interesting history around the topic of educational equity. And we were one of the few districts in this county that was considered low achieving. And in our time together, I was there for 8 years. And similar to Emory, there were, I believe, 5 superintendents in a very short period of time. And we were able to increase our graduation rate so significantly. You can see we were highlighted by the New Jersey Department of Education in multiple places. And so again, I'm sharing with you brief reviews of outcomes, but I'm not really telling you how, because some of that is also, I can't give you the whole book while I'm doing this presentation, even though I would love to, because I think it's a great story. But the how is in that book, and it talks about data-driven instruction. It talks about child-centered approach. It talks about high expectations. It talks about team building, and it talks about monitoring the thing that matters most. And so the third point that we spoke about earlier, what am I leaving with to make me better? That's the whole point of us being together today. I should be able to share with you something that is tangible, that is pragmatic, that you can leave with. And so there's so many answers to this, right? I mean, the left-hand side of the top of this picture where it says Emory Elementary, believe it or not, that's one of the most proud pictures that I have in my career. When I became principal of Emory, I share with you some of the challenges that we had. Another thing that we had is that we were a school in an alley. The alley emptied out to our school, and we didn't have an address on the building. And so I would begin to ask, why don't we have an address? Because if you know anything about running schools, part of your fire code requirements is that the fire department knows where you are in case of an emergency, or the police, et cetera. And so we fundraised, and we were creative, and we were able to buy a sign, a marquee for our school, and we were so proud of that sign. It doesn't look too fancy right now, but in 2005, 6, 7, 8, all the way through, we were just so happy and proud of that. And those pictures on the top are when I was an assistant principal and a teacher, and I tell the stories in my book about the challenges that I encountered as an assistant principal. During that time, for those folks who may recall DC during the early 2000s, my school was in Adams Morgan. It was H.D. Cook. I was an assistant principal, and they had launched an initiative, the superintendent at that time. It was called the T9 initiative. And the 9 worst schools in DC were all reconstituted. They had every person who worked in that building had to interview for their jobs. And my principal hired me to be his principal. We interviewed teachers all summer to try and build this school back, because our school in particular was reconstituted because of abuse allegations. So I won't spoil the rest of the story, but that's what that features. On the right-hand top, when I was a teacher, those other gentlemen in red. All four of us are teachers, and we started a club called the U Club. The U Club stood for Unidad, Umoja, and Unity, where kids were learning about. It was really a club that was centered on kids learning about themselves and learning about others in a non-judgmental space. It was an affinity club that served all students in that school. Um, the painting you see on the bottom were part of our beautification days at Emory, and this was our school creed. We had a griot who traveled schools in DC doing workshops. And I remember him saying this to our kids when I was a vice principal, and I thought it was just so powerful that we created a morning meeting session for the entire school, and we taught the kids this creed, and they said it every morning. And it goes, "My heritage is one of greatness, but I know that I can do more. I must never do less than those who came before. What my mind can conceive and my heart can believe, I can achieve." And you just imagine hearing hundreds of kids saying this and saying it without the adults participating. And it was a powerful piece um, that really, I think, it helped us to take kids from whatever they were experiencing at home to what their mindset would be while we were with them in school. And so I don't know, when I was a principal and assistant principal, I didn't know about Dr. Dweck's growth mindset research. I didn't know about it when I was a teacher, but when I found out about it during my work at GW, it truly reflected my beliefs around grit and around effort, et cetera. And so when I reflected as a teacher, when I would meet my new class, I would always talk to them and say, "Hey, congratulations." And they didn't know me. It was the first day of school. And I would tell them, "You are in the best class in the school. Congratulations. Can you believe it?" And they would be excited because they didn't know that they weren't. That positive reinforcement and belief in their success, and that they're fantastic and that we are great together. It started off uh, the day on the first day of school with my high expectations of them and what they should have of themselves. And it really reflected that Dr. Dweck's um, uh, piece on that. And I carried it all the way through my career. Another piece that was important that's that's in the book as well is talking about making and keeping the main thing the main thing. I know it's become a popular saying, keep the main thing the main thing, but it's such a powerful step to take as a leader. And there's a chapter in my book all about that and how impactful it is. I don't want to run too long here, but I'll push it quickly. So research tells us that classroom teachers and targeted tutoring and mentoring make the difference. Um, Knowing the data and knowing what students need on the cusp is also such a big piece. And that was a big piece for us. Back when I was a principal and assistant superintendent, we were really focusing in on data walls, on really trying to show and demonstrate what the important data for our school academic performance was. And not just keeping it for the adults, but helping students to understand, helping students to be a part of what we're all invested in. Sometimes I've seen this work happen, and when you ask kids how they're doing, they don't have any information. Giving them this information is so powerful and was a great part of influencing the success that I had throughout my career. And so, last piece, backwards mapping, beginning with the end in mind, connecting that to our data. I do a lot of educational consulting now with schools, with school leaders, with superintendents and assistant superintendents around this very important piece. Have you taken the step, it feels like a small step, but it's not. And looked at when your assessments are going to be and how many days of instruction are happening before that. Have you communicated to everyone how important every single day is? Are you constantly, constantly updating those plans and those maps and those dates and those targets because they're so important? What gets monitored gets done. And the staff and the students want to know what you want as a leader. They're studying you as a leader. They know what you care about. They see what you comment on. They see what you focus on. So this gentleman, Commander Estelle, he was an ROTC leader in my high school, and just showing you how important um, educational equity was for me from this young age, 17 years old. I scored pretty good on the SAT, and I was above average student, but not nearly the highest marked student in my grade level. But I really enjoyed ROTC. It was fun for me. We enjoyed exercise. I led a drill team that won awards and all this type of stuff. And some of my friends and I were standing outside, and Commander Ostel, who was a very, very nice guy, very cool commander, drove a convertible car. We thought he was just the coolest. He walked by and he casually asked this group of friends of mine who were all in ROTC, did any of us have a 1,000 on the SAT? And, I sheepishly raised my hand because, it wasn't always cool to be a smart kid. And he took those of us who had our hand up into his office, and he had some papers for us to read and sign and call our parents. And we didn't know, but when we left out that office, we had a full scholarship to Morehouse College, right? There was a partnership between our high school and that college. And just based on us have meeting certain criteria, that equity initiative changed the trajectory of my life. And so here's another equity initiative on the other side, right? When I was superintendent of South Orange Maplewood School District, I had the honor of renaming a school. The Board of Education wanted a school renamed, and instead of me creating a name or finding a name on my own, we worked with the kids at the school to do research about the name of the student, the name that would most reflect them and reflect the students to come. And they actually worked with the historical society of the town, and they found the name Delia Bolden, which was the first Black woman to graduate from high school in that district, and back in the early 1900s. And it was just a great thing. So just to close out, we spoke a little bit about the Teach for America Ivy League teacher from Emory. Um, and I spoke about, how he was taken out of the school in handcuffs. And the student who was interacting with him became just a notorious, challenged, troublemaking kid in that school who was later identified as having a disability and was transferred. So someone sent this to me. That's Emory in the background. That gentleman is to the left is the teacher. The person sitting down is the former student. In one of the most shocking circumstances you can believe, this kid, and I say kid now, he's an adult, he reached out to his former teacher. So what ended up happening is the family of the teacher, who was pretty affluent, reached a settlement with the parent of the student, and the charges were dropped. And the teacher never came back to teaching. He became an attorney, and he was married, and he was working in a firm, and he received a Facebook friend request from this student. This student who he admitted to having nightmares about, right? As the student who ended up with the accusations putting him in jail. And he talked to his wife, he talked to his therapist, etc. and he accepted the friend request. And the student and he began to talk, and it turns out that the student turned his life around. He actually attended my alma mater, Morehouse College, and they're writing a book together about forgiveness. And like just that spark continues to spark me as a school leader. You never know the lives that are going to. You're not even really sometimes touching them, but you're observing them, you're supporting them, and this was one. So again, this is the QR code for my book. I have lots of stuff in there about this topic and about leadership in general and about the journey that I had in this space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. We appreciate all of that information in your talk. I wonder if while people are thinking of their questions, if I could indulge myself by asking you a question just to get us started. So I was reading through your book, and there was something you wrote toward the end of the book that was that really made me think as someone who works to prepare school leaders. And I might just read a couple sentences and then I'd be curious your response. So you say in the book that you cringe when someone calls you a fearless leader. And then this is what you go on to say. You say, from my perspective, being brave or courageous does not mean that you are without fear. Having the courage to make tough decisions and maintaining an unwavering commitment to deny political pressures and easy outs that do not benefit our most vulnerable populations can mean entering into spaces where hate and anger are directed toward you. And I think what this quote made me wonder about is people who might be thinking of entering into the education field right now and the kinds of things they might be worried about in thinking that about that. And I wonder if you could just say a few words about what you would say to people who are considering going into education as a profession and what sort of supported you as you were challenged in different times that you had to do the courageous thing, even when it might have been unpopular.
Oh, what a thoughtful question. Thank you. So I guess part of what I think people are worried about now, I wasn't worried about, right? I just knew I wanted to be a teacher. I had a great experience with teachers in my life, and it just always felt natural to me. I was a camp counselor. I I just it fit me, right? And so I never thought about the things that could happen as an educator that would be negative, right? And so I was gleefully ignorant that way. But I know that now the reality that we're in now is different. And so um, when I say in that portion of the book that sometimes we think courage means that I'm not scared, and that's not what it means. It means that even though there is something to fear, my what I love and what I value and my mission and vision in life and always doing the right thing even when it's tough uh, will make me do the right thing even when uh, it may result in something negative happening to me. I was working with the superintendent recently. I'll be really quick with this. Um, and we were talking about those kinds of questions, right? And no one tells you when you're in a great program like GW that one day um, you have a board meeting happening, and the people in the board meeting, not the board members, but whomever is there attending, is not happy with something happening. And you didn't do anything to spur that, but that anger that they're experiencing, they're chanting or whatever it may be, and you're walking in there representing the school district and understanding that can create that anxiety and those things. But when you are committed to the students and the mission and the vision and your own belief system, it allows you to overcome that.
Thank you so much.